here, huh?
Right here.
Okay, so now when it comes to, I know you do adaptations, you do, new works, you do poetry, you do musicals. Is there one that feeds you more? Is there something that feeds you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that, because you do, you're so wonderful at so many things. What really, which one just kind of hits your butt?
I think they all feed me. I think for me, poetry is more powerful when a character is experiencing some type of distress. Because I find that we as humans, we speak in poetic language when we can't find the words. It becomes poetic. Poetry, one example of poetic dialogue is the terseness, the stagnant, or the sharpness of language. That makes language poetic. But also, the way you can use ellipses or pauses makes something poetic. And so I think we naturally speak poetry when we're at our happiest moment in life, right, and when we're in our lowest moment. I was reading this article where they said our first language was music. We sung before we spoke. Right. And so it's natural. So in a musical, when a character is experiencing a high moment in their life or a low moment, they'll sing. In a play, for me, when a character is experiencing that, I'll use poetic language. So those are my two devices. And then what I'm learning from Gospel of Love and Kindness is I never have written a play that was so real. This is my first real play.
And what does that mean? Because I don't think they understand that.
Well,
I kind of do, but
yeah.
Can you explain the difference between, because we don't want to give away anything in the actual play, but what you normally do opposed to what's happening, what they're going to experience in Love
Sure.
and Kindness. If you could do that,
That's
might be helpful.
Great question. So the aesthetic I mostly work in is magical realism.
Do we know what that is? Please, can you, she doesn't.
Yeah, so magical realism is, if you ever read any Toni Morrison, Lorca, Marquez, a little bit of James Baldwin, but it's literature or art that is both magic and real at the same time. And the magic nature of the art doesn't apologize for itself. For example, characters, when something magic happens, like if this nightstand rises in the air, we as characters in the play won't be go, oh, look at that. We'll go, oh, okay. It won't be anything to us because magic is accepted in the world as realism. See, so magic and realism work hand in hand. So if you're familiar with Song of Solomon, the father flies. Right. So the character, you never see the character saying, oh my God, he's flying. I mean, one character, they are amazed by it, but it's also part of the world. The superstitious, the magic nature or the mystical nature of the world is accepted. In this play, it feels more like realism, which I had a beautiful challenge. Che challenged me to write something in a more of a naturalistic vein. And so that the realness or the topics of the reality of the world had more of a punch. And so I cheated a little bit. There's a little bit of magical realism in it. I couldn't help it.
You can't help it.
I couldn't help it. It's me. But for the most part, it's a very real play. It's a very naturalistic play.
And has that been a challenge? I know he challenged you, but how has it felt doing something totally kind of different and outside of what?
Yeah, we had to talk about that the other night. I love it. I didn't think I was going to love it. But sitting there, and it's like seeing yourself dance a certain dance for the first time. I love it. I didn't think I was going to love it. I watch a lot of naturalistic plays, and I always wonder, if they just had that character climb the wall right there, it would be really cool, And so seeing myself do something very naturalistic, I love it. I didn't think I was going to love it as much, but I do. I love this play.
You do?
I love it. I really do.
And you know it's going to, you still got, you can see stuff that you're going to continue to work on.
Yeah, and stuff that I can make more real.
Okay.
And less magical.
Do you think you'll continue down in some of your other works you're going to do, continue down that vein of naturalistic?
Mostly for work that I'm writing for the community or about a community would definitely be more.
So it'll be a new way of looking at things for you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Theater is about, you always have to challenge yourself. That's
absolutely.
why I stay in it. So I always want to learn a new craft, a new skill, always.
Wow, that's something new, to a new feather in your cap.
That's right.
I love that. Questions? Anybody got anything? I'm always letting you chime in. I want you to think I'm just ignoring you. No? Nay? Yes, ma'am.
How is working with your director?
It's,
Do you have a synchronicity?
we do. I've worked with Che I think about 5 or 6 years we've been working together. And so this is the second show we've done this year. He directed Black Odyssey in Denver, which was a huge success. And it's been great. I think one of the really beautiful skills that Che has is because he's also a well-known playwright. He knows how to collaborate with a writer, and he kind of knows when to give you a note and kind of when to lay it off and when to challenge you and when to sort of see. And, you know, and so I've never worked with a director before that said, oh, you'll find it. You know, even when previews, don't worry about it, we'll get there. You know, he's very patient. And I need that, you know, because there's only so many things I can do in a moment.
Right.
And so he really understands that. And then I think as a director, I learned so much from him, how he uses space, even in terms of being minimalistic, how sometimes being simple and less is always more. And I love that. That's the aesthetic that I respond most to. So it's I always say, you know, he's my favorite director. He doesn't like for me to say that, but he is. He's my favorite director.
Don't like that, Che? Don't say that. But I totally understand.
He is my favorite.
I totally understand.
He's my favorite director for sure.
Well, I don't know how much time do we have. I'm trying to be good because I don't want to, you know. Oh, good. We did really good. So now this is the time to ask your last minute questions before we start to wrap this up. Yes, ma'am.
So you talked a little bit about being from Oakland via New Orleans and that pathway. Many times people in Chicago refer to themselves, well, I'm from the South Side, but I'm really from Mississippi. And how does that come into play into the development of the gospel of loving kindness? Have you been able to take in some of the Mississippiisms that many African Americans have here in the city of Chicago?
I think so. I think it's inevitable with all of my work because, you know, when my family moved from New Orleans, they all moved together. So, you know, dozens of them moved together and lived on the same street. So my neighbors were my family. And so I think the southernness is in me because I was raised in it. And so I think it's inevitable. It's always finds its way in my work. But this recent piece that I did, this musical called Song of Paradise, is really about someone from Mississippi coming to the North. And that's the piece that I worked on just before Gospel of Love and Kindness. And so a lot of that seeped into the world. And I'm really fascinated with migration and why we migrate. And I don't know if you all read The Warmth of Other Suns. Yeah, and so that was a huge inspiration for the Gospel of Love and Kindness, definitely.
And I had the benefit of working on Song of Paradise, doing a small workshop here in Chicago. And I have to say that was a big thing I loved about the piece is there's a certain language, and I know Marcus always talks, there's a certain language, the way that African Americans speak on the south side of Chicago that has a flavor of Mississippi and that southern, but it still has a northern sound to it. And he loves that sound. And that's why I know he loves that musical thing about Chicago and African American culture because we have a certain sound to our voice here in Chicago. And it's one of those things that people always ask, because I asked him when I met him, where are you from? Because he says, you know, I live in New York. I said, I know all that. Okay. But where are you from? Because you can always hear, you know, from your ancestors and your grandparents, you always hear where you're from in your voice in the African American culture more than you do that I live in Chicago, I live in New York. Because whenever people meet me, they go, well, where are you from, Faye? Because you don't sound like you're from Chicago. And I always have to admit that although I live in Chicago, you know, my people are from Tennessee and Mississippi, you know, and I got a little New Orleans in there too when I blend it all up, you know, that Creole thing. So I understand that. So that piece, you know, was a wonderful piece, just listening to it musically and listening to the language. He has such a great way of grasping that language. And I think you're going to hear it today when you hear Gospel of Loving Kindness. You'll hear yourself. And I think that's the thing I like about Marcus's work. Now, commenting on his work is that when you sit and you listen to his work and you watch his work, you as an audience member, I know I've always felt that I hear myself. I see myself. So I don't feel disconnected from his work. And sometimes we can feel like when we go to the theater, and I think that that's the experience that you'll have today, is that you'll feel connected and you will know some of this story, even though it hasn't happened to you per se. You will hear yourself. You will feel the city. You will feel those things that we know about Chicago that other people don't know about us in Chicago. Because a lot of people can talk, they talk a lot about us being Chicago. Aren't you afraid to be there? Why would you live there? It's so freaking cold. I mean, I get the, you know, I mean, they do. I mean, People have all of these, pronouncements about Chicago. And the first thing I always say is, have you ever been?
Right.
And they all go, no. I said, well, then you'll never understand the love that we have for Chicago unless you experience that. So I encourage you to have a wonderful time today. Continue to support Victory Gardens.
Yes.
Continue to support the artists here. Che, you're doing an amazing job. Thank you so much for coming to Chicago and just opening up our hearts and our lives. And we'll see you at the next Artist Talk, okay? So, watch the web, keep supporting the theater. Thank you, and have a great afternoon, and be safe. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Great question.
Marcus Gardley, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.